specifically about the RFRA provision, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act that passed in 1993. The Supreme Court had recently ruled on as it applied to the Hobby Lobby case. First, I'm going to read through a few of my notes here. I want to ask the question: why religious freedom? Why is this an important measure that we ought to pursue? This last year, I introduced House Bill 1023, which was intended to largely mimic the federal statute, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, passed in 1993. So I wanted to read a few of the things I had written down and I prepared my prepared notes at that time. The free exercise of religion is our first and most basic freedom as Americans. Indeed, because they realized the value and significance of religious liberty, our nation's founders included robust protection for the free exercise of religion in the First Amendment enshrined in the Bill of Rights. And by selecting the phrase, this is key, and by selecting the phrase free exercise of religion for inclusion in the Constitution instead of a mere freedom to worship or believe, which is one of the pushbacks I often get when I'm talking with friends on Facebook and other forms of social media. They say, oh, we already have religious freedom. You can worship any way you want to. Catch that distinction. And by selecting the phrase free exercise of religion for inclusion in the Constitution, the founders showed that religious freedom includes not only religious adherents' rights to hold their beliefs or opinions, it also guards their religiously motivated conduct against government punishment or correction. As Jefferson noted, no provision in our Constitution ought to be dearer to man than that which protects the rights of conscience against the enterprises of civil authority. On February the 6th, a famous man said, "Today we profess the principles we know to be true. We believe that each of us is wonderfully made in the image of God. We therefore believe in the inherent dignity of every human being, dignity that no earthly power can take away. And central to that dignity is the freedom of religion, a right of every person to practice their faith how they choose, to change their faith if they choose, or to practice no faith at all, and to do this free from persecution and fear." That's President Barack Obama. So, you know, the same president who led the charge against the Hobby Lobby case. Yes, that one. So how did we get here? How did this issue ever even come up? Up until 1990, the traditional understanding of what it meant, the free exercise of religion clause in the First Amendment, was that if government were going to try to burden your exercise of religion, it had to have a compelling state interest and be the least restrictive means possible. Those are the legal terms. Put in terms that I can understand as a realtor. That means that government ought to have a darn good reason, and there better be no other way that they can get this accomplished. So for instance, if your faith tells you that you shouldn't pay taxes, well, there's a compelling state interest in that. And there's frankly no way around, as you said, government costs money. So there's a compelling state interest in getting involved in there. One of the examples I would use as I was explaining why this bill was necessary is because without this protection, without the legal language of least the compelling state interest, least restrictive means possible. For instance, if you were an observant Jew, many observant Jews believe that the body ought not be disturbed after death. So they would object to an automatic routine autopsy. Not all, but some do. And so if someone dies of old age, well, why can't we just observe? Why can't we just let them observe their religious views? However, if there's a murder, then clearly there's a compelling state interest on why we want to perform an autopsy. So why can't we allow people to honor their own religious beliefs? So in 1990, the Supreme Court had ruled that if a law was generally applicable, in other words, it didn't single out a religion, but if a law was generally applicable, then if that impacted somebody's free exercise of religion, that's too bad. Oh well. And so the Congress reacted in 1993 by passing RFRA, as we like to call it. It was passed unanimously out of the United States House and had 3 dissenting votes in the U.S. Senate, signed into law by President Bill Clinton. I will read you parts of his signing statement, which are very strong, here in a few minutes, assuming I did not leave those notes in the car, which I may have. So, in 1993, passed RFRA. In 1997, the Supreme Court ruled that RFRA only applied to federal courts. So now, this protection that the Congress had envisioned for applying both in the federal level and on the state level was cut in half, if you will. So a number of states began to pass I guess you'd call it mirror legislation. So there are 18 states that have passed, I think 19 now, I think Mississippi passed one this past legislative session. There are at least 30 states in our country that have this compelling state interest, least restrictive means possible test as it relates to the free exercise of religion. Some of those have through judicial ruling, and some of these radical right-wing states like Maine and Illinois, some of those just radicals, Pennsylvania, and every state that borders us has this basic protection of compelling state interest, least restrictive means possible. It is also worth noting that in 1998, then Senator Obama did not abstain, he did not vote present, he actually voted for the Illinois version of RFRA. And so the whole point of the RFRA language is to protect the citizens' rights from interference from government. One of the things that it became controversial this last year, when I introduced the bill, I introduced it in February. As a matter of fact, I think you and I were having a conversation about, did Senator Dugan have a bill that you and I were talking about that day? And I was in the process of introducing that bill, talking to Virginia. I was in the process of introducing that bill, and I wasn't ready to tell her yet. But we had lunch that day, and she and I were talking about Senator Dugan's bill. And so up until this year, this has never been a controversial measure. It passed in Kansas last year, almost unanimously. But at the time I was introducing my bill, right after I did, the Arizona law, the Arizona issue came into the national focus, which Arizona already had the basic RFRA protection, and they were trying to augment it and to clarify some things. And MSNBC and CNN and many other national media outlets began to take an editorial approach to what was going on in Arizona, and then said, oh, Georgia's introducing one of these bills too. So what had again been a previously uncontroversial measure became very controversial. The reason why that is a number of folks from the LGBT community, the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community, believed that this was an attack on them, that I was somehow trying to discriminate against them. As a matter of fact, that night, after I introduced the bill in the committee and I was interviewed by a number of local Atlanta TV stations, I set my DVR to record because I just wanted to see how they portrayed it. And sure enough, legalizing discrimination in Georgia was the headline by Fox 5 and Channel 11 and those kinds of things. And I was just, it's like, oh my goodness, all these years I've heard about media bias and media slant, but when it happens to you, it's quite unnerving. And so I knew what my intentions were, and they were not about discrimination. I kept hearing things like, this is Jim Crow for the homosexual community, and it was so frustrating. People who know me know that while I'm unapologetically a very conservative Republican, I'm also someone who works well with others, who takes a more conciliatory approach to the way I interact, even with people from the other side, with whom I have great disagreement on public policy prescriptions. And so the reason why the LGBT community reacted the way it did is because out in Colorado and in Washington State and New Mexico, there were a baker, a florist, and a photographer who had all been successfully sued by a same-sex couple because they had said, due to their faith, they didn't feel comfortable participating in a same-sex airline. And again, the homosexual couple that brought those suits, they were all successful in court or whatever jurisdiction was over that. And so they viewed this as, and they kept saying, this is a way to turn homosexuals away from the proverbial lunch counter. Couldn't be further from the truth. And it's angering to me that was the suggestion. The thing I want to put to you, I was having this conversation over here in the side room. The whole point of the Bill of Rights was to protect government, was to protect the citizens' rights from future encroachment from the government. So let me read you a few. See if you think this is crazy. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of people to peaceably to assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. That's pretty good. Number 2, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Amendment number 3, no soldier shall in time of peace be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. I'm going to read 2 more for you. I'm getting yours, Micah. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue, but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. And number 7.
Read that one to the TSA.
Yes, exactly. In suits at common law, where the value in controversies shall exceed $20, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved, and no fact tried by jury shall be otherwise re-examined in any court of the United States than according to the rules of the common law. Now, you can't imagine. I mean, I believe, as I would engage in conversation with folks, it's, oh, Sam, this is a how do they say it? This is a problem in search of an issue. No, this is a problem. This is a solution in search of a problem. This kind of thing really doesn't happen. I think we take so many of our freedoms for granted. We just assume that it's always been the Bill of Rights. But before the Bill of Rights, there was a reason why the founders said we've got to put these in place, because government throughout all of human history has had a history of taking more than it should, being able to justify, well, if we do it this way, it's for a good cause. We can take away these rights from you for a little while because we're accomplishing a greater good. And so I think part of the reason we've been lulled to sleep to think, oh, it can't possibly happen to us. The founders understood that man is not born good. There is as to use a religious term, there is a sin nature. And the reason that we put restrictions on government is because we have seen a history of them over thousands of years taking more than they ought to. So, to kind of begin to wrap that part of the story up. So, the Sunday before I was to give the testimony in committee, I'd gotten a sense, wow, I'm about to enter a battle here. I had not expected, when I introduced the bill, I was thinking this is an issue that had brought Republicans and Democrats, conservatives and liberals together for 200 years in America. So I thought this is about as Americana and apple pie as it gets. We're just going to put this into law. We're going to have these protections for our citizens. But the Sunday before I was to testify that Tuesday, I realized this is not going to be a cakewalk. And so I stood up and asked my Sunday school class, could you be in prayer for me this week? I'm introducing this bill. It's on the issue of religious freedom. And I'm getting the sense that I'm about to have a difficult week. So that Tuesday happens. I'm called things that I never expected I would be called. And it was a very difficult week. As a matter of fact, one of your fine folks reached out to me at that point and said, hey, I've got this, I want to do an interview with you, and I couldn't get back to everybody. I had gotten so many different requests for comment, and again, I've got some less than complimentary things that were said to me along the way. So it was a very difficult week for me. So I get to the Sunday school class the next week, and the Sunday school teacher said, hey, can you share with us, how did your week go? Is there any way we could keep praying for you? I said, yeah, I'll be glad to share with you how my week went. And so I get up and I share, here's what happened, here was the objection, and I said something to the effect of, and what's so concerning to me is that many people got carried away by the media portrayal of what this bill was and was trying to do. And had a woman come up to me afterwards who knew me. We go to Sunday school together. I attend a very conservative theological and for that matter, conservative political church. And she comes up to me and she says, I have to admit, I was one of those that was carried away by the media portrayal. And it dawned on me. I attend First Baptist Woodstock. Again, one of the most conservative theological churches you can imagine. Pastor who is not afraid to step on toes, even as it relates to cultural issues and issues of government overreach. He's not afraid to stand up and say something. And here's someone in my own Sunday school class believed the media report that we were trying to institute Jim Crow laws for homosexuals. I thought, we've got a battle on our hands, and we are losing the intellectual battle. We are not making the arguments. I just assumed that people that I went to Sunday school class would understand the importance of protecting our first freedom. So many people often ask me, what can we do? Well, first off, have these conversations in your Sunday school classes, in your synagogues, in your Rotary clubs. Have these conversations, correct the record. Talk to your pastors. Encourage them to say a word about this. All right, another question that I get asked now recently is, how does the Hobby Lobby case affect this issue moving forward? What happened in this last session, because Delta, Coca-Cola, and Home Depot all came out and expressed dismay about this bill, and that because it was legalizing discrimination, they opposed it. We decided, you know what, why don't we pull back? Let's kind of gather, let's inform the troops, let everybody know here's what we're trying to do, and let's try again next year. So I made that decision to pull back and come back at it again in the 2015 session. So in the meantime, the Hobby Lobby case, on which the whole bill that I was introducing was founded on, was decided 5-4. And in short, not being an attorney, I don't know if I can give you a legal opinion on how the Hobby Lobby case affects this issue moving forward. What I can say is this. One, it certainly, from a legal point of view, only strengthens the case. What I'm afraid it might do is also have a way of polarizing the issue politically. Now that Democrats are committed to the meme, the war on women, and that this is somehow an attack by the right, I'm afraid that the Democrats may dig in their heels and oppose this kind of measure just out of sheer partisanship. When I introduced the bill, I had two Democratic co-signers, 4 Republicans and 2 Democrats. I'm a little bit less optimistic that I would have Democratic support this next time, but hopefully so. It is frustrating that I left Clinton's signing statement in the car, because that was how I was going to end, but let me try to paraphrase best I can. When Bill Clinton signed the bill into law, he talked about how this is America's first freedom. This is one that we need to be very vigilant about. He goes on to say, if we can't be about protecting the rights of people's consciences, then basically, what are we here for? And there's a line right in his last paragraph, and I'll try to find it while we're asking questions, where he says we should fight to the death over this issue. And very strong language, particularly for a man who is known for being very good with his words. Very strong statement to say this is something worth fighting for. This is not about, as I introduced the bill, this is not about discrimination on any. This is about protecting people's free exercise of religion, to continue to exercise how their conscience dictates, both in their personal life. And frankly, as the Supreme Court seemed to agree with me, your rights of conscience don't end because you start a business either. And so with that, I'd be glad to take a few questions and see what I can answer for you. And if you'll pardon me, I'm not text messaging. I'm going to be looking up, see if I can find Clinton's signing statement while you're asking. So I am listening. Yes, ma'am.
So what is your strategy? Because they're going to change the context again. They're
Right.
going to manipulate this again, and that's how they win, if they change the context of the entire discussion. So how are you going to propose it this time so that we're going to be able to keep it from polarizing everybody like they want to do?
Right.
I don't think it's good for the country to polarize it either. So I don't know what the approach is either. I get so frustrated with that, with all this stuff. But
Right.
how are we gonna keep the true context up front?
I certainly can't stop the left from demonizing what people on the right do. Frankly, if the left is good at, and I'm going to get to your question,
No, I know.
if the left is good at anything, it is at demonizing the right. They're not particularly good at running government. They're particularly inefficient at doing it, and most of their policy prescriptions end up in great failure. But they're very good at demonizing the right and our motives. So I imagine there will still be some demonization that takes place on that.
Yeah.
Now I'm more mentally prepared for it than I was last time. I honestly think that the difference needs to be what I'm doing today in terms of informing people, getting some information to you so that you are ready to go talk to your representative and your senator and the governor and the lieutenant governor and the Speaker of the House and say, hey, this is not how the media has characterized it. I've studied this issue. I need you to be informed, to be able to talk about the issue to your elected officials and say, this is something that's important to me. And frankly, as you know, all of you are constitutional conservatives, you tell me. Let's put a simple, I mean, this is again, I'm not trying to, this is not some radical provision. This is a protection of a first freedom. And so there are a number of groups, religiously affiliated largely, that are trying to organize and inform their constituencies, whether it be the Georgia Baptist Convention, Faith and Freedom Coalition, that are trying to bring people together so that they are informed and ready to go this next session. So I think, I mean, I've watched it in politics, it is all about political will. And the representatives and the senators need to know that their constituents think this is a big deal.
Can you get into the liberal or the black churches and talk to them?
There certainly is some interest there, and that is something we will absolutely, yes. I know those are, yeah, Virginia?
I want to bring up, this is not just a Christian thing at
Right.
all. I have talked with a guy that works on this in every state. He has an organization that he's the head of, and he has worked to pass these in many other states. And first of all, there's some important things that I've learned. One, this provision would not likely have protected the baker, the florist, and the photographer in those particular cases. So this has been so mischaracterized that it's just unbelievable. But also another important thing is when the federal RFRA was put into place, in the first 3 years after that, 18% of the cases were from religious minorities that each held less than 1% of the religious population's membership. You know, I mean, so you're talking about Muslims, Jewish people, and I think Native American Indians who have the tribal religions filed the most suits under this. So I think that we've got to really all be very conscious of frankly, protecting the truth on this matter, and not only protecting the truth, but promoting the truth about what this really is and what it really does. Because if they can take your rights away and my rights away, you know, and we need to tell the left, if they can take my right away, they can take your right away.
That's right.
And they love the right to free speech, and they love a lot of their other rights, and they love the right to practice their religion as they see fit. And so I think it's really important that we protect all of our rights and make sure that people understand what this really is.
Let me add a couple of things. I meant, and I skipped over this in my notes, please forgive me. When I would be explaining what kind of protections does this provide, I would give 2 or 3 different examples. One, there was the city of Philadelphia that had passed an ordinance that you could not feed the homeless outdoors.
I remember that.
And because Pennsylvania had a state RFRA, its local people of faith came to them and said, wait a minute, feeding the homeless is a natural extension of our faith. What do you mean, government, that you're going to tell me I can't feed the homeless? And so because Pennsylvania had a state RFRA, it was overturned. The city of Texas, there was a pastor who had a prisoner reentry program for nonviolent offenders. But because of a city ordinance, that got shut down. And because Texas had a state RFRA, it was overturned because it was a natural extension of his faith. He was trying, and he, frankly, he was doing good for, I mean, obviously, he's trying to do good for the community. And then probably in the most famous case, Fox News covered this at great length a year or two ago. There was a university student in Florida who had been given a classroom assignment. The classroom had been given an assignment to write the name of Jesus on a piece of paper and stomp on it. And the student said, "Oh, whoa, wait, no, I can't do that. This is against my faith. I feel very uncomfortable with this from a faith perspective." And the school began to bring action against not the professor, but the student. And lawyers got involved and said, wait a minute, you need to realize there is a state RFRA protection here. And if we take this to court, you will lose. And the school backed off. So in that case, we were able to avoid litigation because there was this protection in place. And as I mentioned earlier, many observant Jews on the issue of the routine automatic autopsies. So let me read President Clinton's signing statement. And these are a few paragraphs from it. The free exercise of religion has been called the first freedom, that which originally sparked the development of the full range of the Bill of Rights. Our founders cared a lot about religion. And one of the reasons they worked so hard to get the First Amendment into the Bill of Rights at the head of the class is that they well understood that what could happen to this country, how both, changing pages, how both religion and government could be perverted. That's too small. Could be perverted if there were not some space created and some protection provided. They knew that religion helps to give our people the character without which a democracy cannot survive. They knew that there needed to be a space of freedom between government and people, and people of faith that otherwise government might usurp. What this law basically says, speaking of RFRA, is that the government should be held to a very high level of proof before it interferes with someone's free exercise of religion. This judgment is shared by the people of the United States as well as by the Congress. We believe strongly that we can never be too vigilant in this work. So today I ask, and this is closing paragraph, so today I ask you to also think of that. We are a people of faith. We have been so secure in that faith that we have enshrined in our Constitution protection for people who profess no faith, and good for us for doing so. That is what the First Amendment is all about. But let us never believe that the freedom of religion imposes on any of us some responsibility to run from our convictions. Let us instead respect one another's faiths, fight to the death to preserve the right of every American to practice whatever convictions he or she has, but bring our values back to the table of American discourse to heal our troubled land. George W. Bush could have given that. Ronald Reagan could have said that. And this should not be a right versus left issue. This is a First Amendment. This is a First Freedom issue. So, any other questions? Yes, sir.
Who introduced the same bill in the Senate? Was it McCoon?
Josh McCoon, yes.
And do we have like Senate support too? Because obviously, you don't want to. I don't think it's best for this battle to continue to go on. We want to get it passed and move on from it. So if we get it passed in the House, is there good Senate support that you know of, or is there someone to introduce, doing the same type of thing
right
in the Senate that you're kind of doing in the House, educating and getting people on board?
You bet. Yes, I believe there's broad support in the state Senate. And I think it comes back to us as citizens to apply some political heat to our elected officials, that they understand that we as citizens think this is an important protection. And so, yes, there's broad support in the Senate. And I think what had happened is when some major Atlanta companies came out and said, we have real concerns about this, that caused a lot of people to pull back and say, wait a minute. And so our hope is that, frankly, my hope is that these Atlanta companies can say, this is really not our fight. This is not what we were led to believe it was in the media. So this is not our fight, so we'll just stay out of it. And I think if that were to happen. So are you
heading that off with them now, or are you talking to them proactively?
Yes,
okay.
Yes, you bet. Yes, sir.
Keep the faith, sir.
Amen, absolutely.
Thank you.
It's hard to fly with the eagles when you're surrounded by losers.
And we'll be praying for you too.
Thank you.
For sure.
Appreciate that. Any other questions? Come on.
Thank you for doing that.
Glad to do it.
Keep us posted on it.
All right, very good. And I just want to, if I can, since they're in the back of the room, I want to tell you thank you for sending Micah Gravely to the State House. He is politicians are very good at helping you believe what you want to believe about them. But I've seen Micah when the proverbial lights are off, when it would be easier to go along to get along. And I want to let you know, ever since the summer of 2002, I've been committed to trying to find men and women of principle and character to run for office and support them, because we need people who know what they believe, who are more concerned about doing what is right than about getting the applause of man. And I can say without hesitation, Micah Gravely is one of the most resolute. He is one of the most principled people I serve with, and I've seen him in difficult times make hard choices that it would have been easier for him to go along to get along. And so we need more people like Micah Gravely. He's not a perfect man, really close. But I want to say thank you. It means a lot to me that someone of his character and conviction serves down the Georgia Council. Do everything you can to send him back. So with that, I bid you adieu.